Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
Unfortunately, part of the human experience. It's universal. We grieve when something is taken away from us. And most times when we talk about grief, it's the death of a loved one, and they're taken from us, and that can happen in so many different ways. But we even grieve, when a marriage ends, or we lose a promotion, or something that we feel that we should, was taken without our choice. But as I was mentioning, grief is just a natural phenomenon. It's part of the human experience. It doesn't mean you're broken or anything's wrong with you. It's just the way your body processes the loss. There's been a lot of research that looks at, how loss impacts the brain, neurologically and everything, with like phantom limb, like we get used to having a person with us, and then when they're gone, our brain still even searches.
Introducing a powerful new update from the Foojan app. Now with flexible subscription plans to fit your journey monthly, quarterly, or yearly. Our new AI-driven onboarding customizes your path to feeling better, faster, and enjoy a refreshed experience with stunning 3D interactive videos. Update now. Empower your inner voice with Foojan. Download today.
Welcome to the Inner Voice, a Heartfelt Chat podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Foojan Zain. I'm a psychotherapist and author and the founder of the International Awareness Integration Institute. Today, I will be talking with Dr. Jennifer Levin. She is a nationally recognized expert in traumatic grief and sudden loss who helps organizations and individuals respond to unexpected loss with compassion and structure. As a founder of Traumatic Grief Solutions, she provides crisis response consulting, grief leadership training, and trauma-informed coaching for executives and HR leaders to reduce the long-term emotional and financial cost of sudden workplace loss. A licensed therapist, she's one of the fewer than 300 mental health professionals worldwide credentialed as a fellow in Thanatology, which is a study of death, dying, and bereavement. Her new book, which is the one we're going to talk about, is a Traumatic Loss Workbook, Powerful Skills for Navigating Grief, the Grief Caused by a Sudden or Unexpected Death, an accompanying online course of Traumatic Loss Companion of a guided path to healing. And she provides practical tools to help a person cope with grief process, trauma, and find meaning again. We talked about what happens for a person themselves and for their community and the trauma that happens. And she gives some practical tools in exactly what to do, not only for the person, but also for the people who are around her, him, to be able to support them through this. And also she shared about what happens with companies where, they might offer between 3 to 5 days of grieving structure for the person who's going through the grief. But how can we look at the human side? I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure that you will. Now, be sure to subscribe to my podcast and YouTube channel and connect with me through my website, foojanzain.com, or any of the social media platforms, and share your thoughts with me. I'd love to hear from you and know that we do have the virtual clinic of all the certified awareness integration therapists and coaches, and it's a well-being clinic. So please go to awarenessintegration.com and check out if there's any way that we could support you with your well-being across your life and your needs. So without further ado, it's Dr. Jennifer Levin.
Listen up if you want to promote your personal growth and self-awareness. I found the Foojan app last month and I have been absolutely loving it. I personally have never learned guided meditation, but thanks to this app, I now have learned incredible tools for my own stress relief and emotional self-awareness. Not to mention, there are self-evaluation tools and professional coaching available to utilize however your journey to self-discovery takes you. Join Foojan today and redefine your life one step at a time.
Intentional Parenting, a practical guide to awareness integration theory, written by Dr. Jafari, Dr. Foojan Zain, and Dr. Manoukian, three experts in human development, is your step-by-step guide to raising a healthy child prepared for a culturally integrated world. You're supported in parenting infants to adolescents using the latest evidence-based scientific research on parenting. Order your copy on Amazon now.
So excited to have you, everyone. Dr. Jennifer Levin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really pleased to be here.
Of course. You have worked so many years on not only the trauma of people losing their loved ones. It's sudden, a lot of times when we're talking about loss, obviously there's the grief that comes with loss. But with many of the issues, there's also a trauma that has happened since we've lost a person. And even I've noticed, Dr. Levin, that when people have family members who are ill, but even if they go to the hospital and something happens to them, they still, the person who has lost, they still go through some level of trauma. And it's interesting how we could define the difference between the grief or a single concept of a grief and then a grief that is due to trauma or a grief that has trauma beside it. And I'd really love for you to differentiate between the two.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, grieving and loss are unfortunately part of the human experience. It's universal. We grieve when something is taken away from us. And most times when we talk about grief, it's the death of a loved one, and they're taken from us, and that can happen in so many different ways. But we even grieve, when a marriage ends, or we lose a promotion, or something that we feel that we should, was taken without our choice. But as I was mentioning, grief is just a natural phenomenon. It's part of the human experience. It doesn't mean you're broken, anything's wrong with you. It's just the way your body processes the loss. There's been a lot of research that looks at, how loss impacts the brain, neurologically and everything, with like phantom limb, like we get used to having a person with us, and then when they're gone, our brain still even searches for them. And I know Mary Frances O'Connor has written a lot about that in her books, and then Dr. Ted Reinierson has written a lot about more of the science part about it and the phantom limb. So grief is just something natural. When somebody dies, we never heal from that grief. We always carry our love and the pain of the loss, but over time it changes and evolves. And in the beginning, it's very difficult often to do your day-to-day experiences, or responsibilities because you're grieving. But over time and with support, we're able to continue forward and hopefully integrate the loss of a loved one. Now, when there's a loss that happens or a death that happens suddenly or unexpectedly, so many other circumstances are at play. You wake up on a Tuesday morning thinking that you have X, Y, and Z planned. You get a phone call, a knock at the door, you see something on TV, and all of a sudden, everything that you thought or expected or believed about the world could shift in a moment. And again, all of this is going to be circumstantial dependent, whether who it was that died and how they died. But when something like that happens, our body goes into the fight or flight response. Our nervous system becomes dysregulated because of just that immediate occurrence, what it represents. And often we're not even able to understand what it truly represents all in the beginning. And then as a result, we can experience signs or symptoms, I should say, of trauma. Going into the fight or flight response is a very normal thing, very common thing. But it's when somebody gets stuck there that they will often present with signs of trauma. And do you want me to give you some examples of like what that could look like?
Absolutely, please.
Yeah, so like rumination, thinking over and over and over about the event that happened. hypervigilance, being on constant alert, waiting for that other shoe to drop because your nervous system is so hyped and agitated and dysregulated, flashbacks, nightmares. Those types of things are very different than, I don't like the word normal grief, but grief that we anticipate or expect, which is more yearning, longing, sadness. And so you have all of that on top of symptoms that are more related to trauma.
I've had two cases that I was working on, which is very, very extreme. One was that a couple were driving and they stopped somewhere to go to a restaurant, and the woman was on the passenger side, so she got out of the car. The man was driving, got out of the car, and in an instant, a car hit him, and he died right there. So she went into a shock.
Absolutely.
Looked around, and she went into a shock. And it was interesting that what happened to her, she lost her memory of her husband. So she would, as we were talking, she would call me and say, Foojan, this is really weird because I have memory of everything, but I look at his pictures and I don't recognize him. And they were married 50 years. She goes, I look at him and he's not anyone that I know. And although every part of this house that we built together is here. And she was afraid of her own reaction. And she was scared of what was going on in her head. It took almost 4 months before she could come back kind of like on earth and accept that, oh, he was here, he was alive, and then he's gone. And then it's interesting that grief actually started at that position after 4 months of passing away. So she would go through the whole, celebration of his life, going through with the family. But in her world, she would be looking like, I have no idea what's going on. And I had one mother who, her wonderful young son went to the ocean just to swim. And they were all on the beach. And he was around 30, just the amazing peak of his life. And he went into the ocean and got drowned. And she just went into this space of absolute hallucination and delusion. And she would keep going to the ocean and was going to walk to go get her son back. And people had to go get her and come back. So that took almost 5 months before, her system could come back and actually accept what's happening. So it's, like you said, the grief is the grief, but when the sudden concept of somebody not expecting this happens, the trauma is on top of the grief. And share with us how you work with the trauma itself so that it can go into the natural process. We won't call it normal, we'll call it natural process of grief.
Yeah. So it's interesting in that first example. So her body was actually protecting her with that shock and disbelief and the memory. And so when somebody's had a sudden or unexpected death, the first thing we do is safety and stabilization, because you've literally had the rug pulled out from underneath you. Janice, I should have written her name down. Janice Bowman, there's a middle name there, and I apologize that it's slipping me for a minute, wrote a book about the loss of the shattered assumptions. And we have this we all have these internal assumptions in our mind about how we think the world would work. So my son's going to go to the beach and be fine. We can drive our car and be fine. We work hard, we get rewarded. The people around us are good and safe. And there's a natural order, predictability about the world. And so we don't really realize that we have these internal assumptions until they're shattered. And something like this just shatters everything, which is why it's such a disoriented loss, I should say a disorienting event. And you go into shock or disbelief or going into the ocean because I think I can save my son. And so getting back to your question, the first thing is stabilization and safety. So when your whole world has been shattered, what feels safe early on? Who are safe people? What are safe things to do? This is a lot of grounding, a lot of working with that dysregulated nervous system, acknowledging the assumptive world has been shattered, but that it can be rebuilt again. I work with clients, I use a lot of building routine and structure early on because I'll have people, busy, busy, busy people. This happens, and all of a sudden calendars blank because don't want to get out of bed, not going back to work. And so it's like, okay, if we can give your body some routine and structure, we can set some guardrails. We can start to rebuild that sense of like your body, because there's, what we understand intellectually and then how our body responds. And it's a long time for the two of those to come together. And so what time are we going to get up in the morning? Making sure that we eat meals at a specific time, going for a walk, seeing somebody who feels like they're safe and supportive, which can actually be harder to find after something like that. So it's all about safety, stabilization, building resources. And that could take 3 months. It could take 6 months. It could take a year. There's no timeline. But we cannot work on anything until those are accomplished. And also, we don't want to re-traumatize anybody during that time. And so we want to get them into a better place so that when the grieving, that reality really sinks in, they're better resourced and tooled.
Absolutely. I think there's also a difference between like a natural disaster and something that the whole society is going through. I've, worked with people who were part of revolutions and a lot of their children and, people who their friends got killed in front of them. They went through, survival guilt. And so there's a lot different when someone is going through something which is, it's just them and the rest of the society and life is going on, versus they are part of the trauma. They definitely had a lot of loss, like if the fires, right? The fire that just happened in Southern California, or even with COVID, a lot of people suddenly lost a lot of people who they loved, but it was something that was happening across the world. I've worked with people who were part of the political movements or regime changes where through the demonstrations, they had their friends killed, and same thing, they went through the shock and the trauma, the loss. There's a different dynamic when that happens, where the trauma is a social trauma, let's say, and it's not a personal trauma. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm understanding. So first of all, that's a collective trauma, and we are collectively grieving during COVID. We collectively grieved during during the fires. And one thing about trauma, if I can step back a minute, is trauma symptoms normally occur when your coping mechanisms are overwhelmed. And it can happen, you can have a trauma response when something happens to you individually, someone you love, or something you witness. So when you go back to the fires, a lot of people were responding with trauma-like symptoms because they were collectively witnessing their community burn down. Whether they lost their house, whether they had evacuated, whether they knew anybody who particularly died, there is still that. And whenever trauma symptoms or a traumatic event comes about, it also can trigger any previous traumas that we've had in our life. How we respond to a trauma is going to be, again, how safe we feel. Do we have resources to support us? Are there protective factors, social support, belief systems, things like that? And so I think one of the things that's so hard right now in our world is a lot of people are having individual events happen to them. And then there's collective trauma in the world, whether it be a religious group being prosecuted, whether it's what's going on with ICE and deportation, whether it's economic instability in the workplace, whether it's health problems of family members, things like that. And so those are non death losses that are often interacting with personal losses, which make it incredibly difficult to cope with everything that's going on.
There's also an anger and rage that shows up in the process of obviously, dealing with the trauma or the grief process itself. There's a part of us that wants justice or wants to go back and change something, or we're bargaining around it shouldn't be this way. It just should have been another way. And only if others did it another way, this wouldn't happen. There's a lot of, anger even toward things that we don't have control over. Like even I've seen people who were very religious suddenly become angry at God. And then lose all sorts of safety in realm, but get angry at the institutions, the medical industry. They in the fires, they got obviously mad at the mayor and the people who were responsible. So you could see
services, yeah.
Right. There's a sense of like we're so powerless, but at one point we got to gain some sense of power, and that kind of a sense of power comes in that force or the anger that shows up. I know in your book, the traumatic loss workbook that you have, and you share about powerful skills. What are your suggestions about this back and forthness between powerlessness and rage and anger that a person goes through? And what could other people around, like family members and the society that are around them, support the person who's going through the loss?
Yeah, big question. So just want to reiterate that everybody responds to a traumatic event or a loss differently. And as you know, anger is sometimes the flip side of depression. So while some people are very comfortable or expressing anger or anger emerges, I've seen the complete opposite, where others have not been able to express anger at all and they turn it within, or it becomes more of a depressive response. So I just wanted to kind of normalize that everyone's going to experience that differently. I see so much of guilt, regret, and blame. Could have, would have, should have, because it's so much easier to internalize it on ourself. So, in the traumatic loss workbook, there's number one ways to deal with all of these different emotions. They're all acceptable. They're all part of the experience. There's no right or wrong way to do it. We do something, there's a whole chapter devoted to guilt, blame, and regret, and having people write down everything that they're experiencing this about. And then identifying what things were within their control and what wasn't within their control. And then I take through a process of forgiveness and then self-compassion. I'm a big fan of Dr. Kristen Neff and her 3 pillars of self-compassion as an antidote for some of those type of things. And, it's so easy in my great-grandmother, hindsight's 2020. It's so easy, especially after a loss. It seems like all we do is have time to replay everything that happened. But you often do, I believe we do the best we can in the moment. And so having compassion for yourself that, I did the best. But going back to, I think it's so important what you said, there's so much we can't control. We think we can control, and that shattered assumptive world that I talked about, a lot of that is we have control. And then we learn, oh my goodness, we don't. We're not able to protect. So identifying what it is you really can control. And I might work with somebody in the beginning like, okay, you can control what clothes you wear today, what you put in your coffee, what you decide to do. I mean, sometimes work and family commitments and everything obviously put on constraints, but really trying to find that sense, identifying what can I control, what can't I control, and then really focusing on what you can control in a healthy and safe way.
So everyone, Traumatic Loss Workbook, a powerful skills for navigating the grief caused by sudden or unexpected death. You also work with companies, and one of the different cultures that I've seen, it's interesting that many of the Western cultures, the companies, and not just the companies, but I think the culture says you got 3 days to grieve, and then you're done, And grief is very personal and it's private. So we have 3 days that it can be public and people can say condolences and come in and do the celebration of life, and then people just go on their merry way, and it's expected that for you to also go on your merry way. And if you held on to your trauma responses or the natural grief we were talking about, the culture and the companies look at it as this is pathological, there's something wrong here, it should have been all resolved. And then we have cultures that grieve socially all the way to 1 year.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have rituals that the whole society comes and all of it. And I have one person who I was speaking with, and her husband just went to the hospital to get a simple surgery and immediately went into coma, and within 2 days passed away. So the trauma and the loss and the shock was so much. And it was interesting that when I was talking to her, she said, I walked back into the house alone, and I just experienced myself so alone because nobody can experience what I'm experiencing. And the society around me, even very close people, have done their duty of just saying my condolences, and they're done. And she said, I found myself going back to work immediately the next day and pretended that my husband was still in the hospital alive, and I wouldn't even say that he would passed away. And she said, I'm baffled with myself, but it's almost like I can't even tell the world to feel differently. I gotta get myself back to the way that the world is moving forward. And she also comes from another culture that, like she said, if I was in my own country, this would have been gone. Everybody would be here. Everybody would be in my house. And this is so different for me to have to go through this alone.
Yeah. Yeah. So many things to comment on here. So first of all, as you mentioned in businesses, we get 3 days, sometimes 5 days if we have to travel. That's logistical. Grief doesn't start until we get back into the office. And like you mentioned, we get a little bit of support. I'm so sorry, condolences. Oftentimes it lasts through the funeral, but many times people today aren't even doing big funerals. They're waiting and doing a celebration of life a year later. There's research that shows 25% of all employees are grieving at any one time. So a quarter of the employee workforce is grieving. And we go back and people say, I can't say anything, especially women, if they're worried about career and promotions, being seen as, incompetent and productive, emotional. But the thing is that grief costs us over $100 billion each year in the workplace due to lack of productivity, turnover, and absenteeism. And then we have this thing called presenteeism, where you show up to work, everything is fine, but you're not fine.
You're not there.
You're not there. And until employers start to change their culture, which is something I'm so passionate about and I'm working with businesses to do, until you make it acceptable and okay, then you can actually work with your employees to accommodate it. Then you can train leaders and managers because they have no idea. Like, I'm responsible for productivity and deadlines. How do I support this human? And so we need a whole revamp because bereavement leave is just logistical time off for making arrangements, making phone calls, getting casseroles. It doesn't do anything for the grief, especially if it's a traumatic loss.
So what are some of the suggestions that you have for companies or small businesses? Because I think, when we're talking about large companies, sometimes there's more resources in those departments
Absolutely.
where,
Yep.
the jobs can be transferred. In small companies, which
Yeah.
one person might be doing the only job that is available,
Yeah.
and, they're really have to be taken care of. What is some of the suggestions that you have with the
Yeah.
companies in that scale?
Yeah. So that's the things that I work on with businesses and calling it proactive planning, preparing for things that are going to happen so that you're ready with your crisis plans, your communication templates. Like I said, somebody will say, well, I have a 3-day bereavement policy. That does nothing. So, how do you communicate before an employee comes back? How do you prep? So, we train managers and leaders on grief sensitive communication. We help institute a framework to make grief and loss acceptable in the workplace. We help HR provide resources to grieving employees because telling them to call their EAP, first of all, they're not going to. And it's hard to find a therapist these days. Everyone's booked up if you're using insurance. It's also really hard to find a therapist that specializes in grief or loss. So, equipping leaders with all of those resources in house so they can do it and acknowledging, helping them just acknowledge, like, yes, this is a part of life. Like I said in the very beginning, when we grieve, we are not broken. We are having a universal experience. And so allowing those universal experiences to be present in the workplace, you're going to get employees who are loyal, who don't leave, because I think it says that 67% of employees start to look for another job if they don't feel supported by their employee or employer after loss. But employer has to be willing to invest in this before a crisis happens. And that's the hard thing. I mean, business leaders are taxed with so many things in today's world. And until it's a burning crisis, often it doesn't get the attention it needs. But when 25% of your people are hurting at any given time, it's up to you to decide if that's a crisis or a need that needs to be met. So,
That is your responsibility to also attend to it, because I think a lot of times there's this disconnect between
yeah,
hours that you're here. You're only concentrating like a robot, you're concentrating on what we're doing, and all personal life happens after this 8 to 10 hours that you're here. And that's personal. You handle that. You go to your therapist, you go to your family and handle that. The minute you get here, these 8 hours or 10 hours that I'm paying you have to be done in this way. And so there's an expectation of everybody to compartmentalize immediately and split themselves where they can just, concentrate. And I know that part of our work with people is that sometimes they do need to compartmentalize for their own health and be able to, not stay in that pain all day, 24 hours, and for to get a little bit of a break, and sometimes focusing on work and some focusing on an external concept would actually be useful. But that has to happen with the respect of who they are, with their emotion and their body and their capability, and slowly but surely be able to like you said, ground themselves and come back to the reality of what is, slowly getting themselves into co-creating a new reality actually for themselves and whatever is happening in the world at that time.
Yeah, it took a while for medicine to, and so everybody's on a varying degree, but to understand that the mind influences the health. And this is kind of like the same thing of the personal life influence what happens outside the work completely impacts what happens inside the work place.
Oh, very much. And vice versa, yes. And
and a lot of employers aren't there. But I do want to say there are some really wonderful. I've had such a privilege of working with some businesses, schools, communities who really get it And that's the favorite part of what I do is when someone's like, oh, we get that we have human beings and we have to care for human beings to get the workplace to be how we want it to be.
And the value of a person who is with us in as an employee
Yeah.
in a company, because we've done a lot of work to train that person. That person is valuable, and just losing that person, thinking everybody's replaceable. It's not true. A lot of people, yes, everybody is replaceable in some sort, but the quality of, we're missing on a lot of quality of people who they bring with them, their love, their dedication, their skills, and the skill set that they bring. And they, especially people who've been trained and are committed to a company and brought their soul and heart and skills into it, just thinking, oh, well,
No, they don't care about me.
yeah. And they'll leave, and then you have to retrain
Start all over again. Yep.
all over. And that's also a huge investment loss that
I know it is. Yeah, you're double losing. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very important, as you said, that if the management does have this value for the people that they work, they also have value for their personal, emotional construct that they have to go through and allow for that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Is there anything we haven't shared that you really want people to know?
Well, I could talk about grief and loss and trauma all day long, which makes me a little bit different. But just that it's a human experience. I mean, I'm more of reiterating it. And I think you asked me earlier, how can other people show up for somebody? And that's so important, how we show up for people who are grieving. A lot of times, especially if it's been a traumatic loss, we don't know what we need. And so just saying, I think probably what I think one of the worst things you could say is call me if you need anything. And instead, can I drop off dinner Friday night? Can I pick up the kids from school? Can I bring groceries? Things like that. People are afraid of saying the wrong thing, so they don't say anything at all. So instead, can I come over? We can talk about how you're feeling, or if you need a grief break, we can go to the movies. And I think the last thing is this does not stop after 2 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, a year. And so if you're supporting somebody, be in it for the long haul. Be in it for the long haul and make that support consistent, because you even talked about the loneliness. This is something so many people feel all alone and isolated, and yet people are in pain, hurting all the time. And so just connect with somebody, even if you're not sure what to do or what's the right thing, or say so. How do I.
Yeah, sometimes people think that I might be an intrusion where the other person has to now deal with me because I'm trying to support, and they're not in the mood. They don't want to talk about it. I don't even know what to talk. If I talk about things that are not related, it might, the person might experience that I'm minimizing the pain that they're going. If I'm constantly talking about it, they might get overwhelmed and they're done with it because they're already talking, so that's where many people say, well, you tell me what your needs so I can offer you what your needs are. And what you're sharing is a lot of times the person who's in that space doesn't even know what their needs are.
They need, right.
And they're just, if you be open to offer something, and be open that they might accept it and realize, oh, that's exactly what they needed, or be open that they will say, thank you so much, but I'm okay right now and I don't need that. And
then offer again in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Yeah. And
I asked someone, because for the celebration, you have to go and now spend time and ordering and finances and all of that for flowers. Can we do that for you? Because I know that's something that has to happen. And then she said, no, I prefer nothing because everything is set up and I don't want to get it. So it's that piece of, and she said very clearly, all I need is to be able to talk. The logistics have happened. I don't need logistics. I just need something else. So like you said, there's a possibility of sharing, asking, offering, but be open that you can be flexible and work with what is it that they might need from you.
Yeah, and I just want to say one last thing about it. They may not know, especially early on, but they'll usually say, I want to talk about it, or I don't want to talk it. Unfortunately, grieving people have to treat others how to treat them, how to teach others, have to teach others how to treat them. But to say, would it be helpful to talk, or would you like a distraction? They'll tell you. And 90% of the time, I want to talk about my loved one because it keeps them alive.
Yes.
So but don't be afraid. Just be out there. I'd like to just come over and be with you. And that is as important as it is the week after, as it is 6 months after, and 9 months after, and a year. And I think that's probably the most important thing for individuals and the workplaces is to remember this is a long-term situation.
You're like one of the only 300 people in US that has expertise in like death and dying. What is it that people really experience with, and I get it that it's a difference between, when I have to face my own death, there's a different process as I, go through facing that. And I think based on also the shift of the culture a little bit about gracefully ending your life is getting a little bit more acceptable, let's say. So there's a lot more conversation in families when a person allows themselves to even entertain this idea and then, conversing with the whole family about this. So there's a difference between me facing my own death or then, a person facing another person's death. Or, what we've been talking about, which is a sudden loss.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit as we end this, because that's your expertise and I want to pick your brain on your expertise.
So first of all, that number of the 300, I'm one of 300, it's a little bit more now, who have what's called a fellow in Thanatology who are certified. There's many, many, many people, thousands of people who will have expertise in grief and loss, but just that certification. So if I'm understanding your question, can you just restate it a little bit differently? Because I know it's, how do you face your own mortality versus how do you support, just give me one more rephrase if it's okay.
The question, it was more like stating how when we're thinking about death and dying, there's so many different layers, but 3 layers is, one is I'm facing my own. Yep. Another one is I'm facing somebody else's, which is not a traumatic loss, but it is a loss, but it's, it's given that this is happening. And then there's also the traumatic loss. And I think we've talked about the traumatic loss through our conversation. And I just wanted to have some conversation about, when it's not a trauma necessarily, but it is something that we're looking at happening. Yep. So we're still going to go through a lot of the different type of problems.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that clarification. So again, we go back to those cultural norms. If we all were, we have to accept we are all, think it's going to die and pay taxes. Those are the 2 things that happen in the world. And so, but it's still something we don't feel comfortable talking about, even as, I would say 75% of the people. And so we all have to think about our mortality. And I think one of the reasons it's difficult to support somebody is because it makes you think about your mortality. If you've watched your best friend's partner die, oh my goodness, this could happen to me. And so I'm going to stay as far away from that as possible. Whereas if it was, yes, it's painful. Yes, it's incredibly difficult. It'll be one of the hardest things we have to go through, but it's inevitable. And there are ways where we can make it more positive. And one of it is talking about it. So when you're contemplating your own mortality, talk about it with loved ones. And even if they're like, oh, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear this. But wait, yes, it's going to be a difficult thing, but it's going to be more difficult if we don't talk about it. And so just sharing your thoughts. There's some wonderful books out there. Irving Yalom's Staring into the Sun, all of those types of things about starting to think about, it's a natural thing. And I say this as I have a dying dog. And some days I'm like, okay, I'm going to be okay. And other days I'm like, no, I'm not. So accept all of those emotions, but talk about them. So I don't know if that helped at all.
It does, absolutely. Because if each one of us have to get there one way, one day or
another, we're going to get there one way or another. Yep.
So everyone, please get this book, The Traumatic Loss Workbook, Powerful Skills for Navigating the Grief Caused by Sudden or Unexpected Death by Dr. Jennifer Levin. How can people find you?
Oh, thank you for asking. They can find me in 2 different ways right now. They can go to my first website, Therapy Heals. I don't know if you put that in the show notes. Therapy Heals, and that's where you can find out about my book and the actual online companion course for individuals. And there's 36 videos of me narrating. And then at Traumatic Grief Solutions, my other website, which is all the business and the corporate work. So both of those ways, email me, Jennifer at Therapy Heals or Jennifer at Traumatic Grief Solutions. I love responding to people. And even when they aren't clients, just helping point them in the right direction.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you for having me as a guest. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you. And for all of you who are out there, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. And until next week, bye-bye.
Are you a psychotherapist looking to enhance your practice? The Awareness Integration Therapy developed by Dr. Foojan Zain is a comprehensive guide to the principle and techniques of this powerful therapeutic approach. Join the growing community who have elevated their practice and expanded their skills by embracing awareness integration therapy and witnessing its life-changing impact. Order your copy on Amazon now.